It's the 25th September 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. And we got lots and lots and lots and lots of news to cover. Let's get rid of the annoying classical lovely music. So we got a poll. Shinzo Abe, the former prime minister, was assassinated, get a state funeral. Because he's got a state funeral coming up in a few days. And he poisoned the planet on purpose with radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland. And the ultimate insult to Japan is to give him a state funeral, put him on a pedestal. There was somebody set themselves on fire the other day in Japan rather than have Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated for reasons that are not quite clear. Oh, I got done to myself. Should Puerto Rico go nuclear? Now they're saying right now there's over 3 million people in Puerto Rico that don't have power, which is the entire country. And Forbes, in all his wisdom, tries to claim that because the infrastructure was torn apart, which it was, of course, in since Fukushima, 2017, I think it was 3 times, 2 hurricanes back to back, with wind gusts over 185 miles per hour. And stripped a lot of the topsoil off the country, right? Let alone everything else. It's just the worst place you would put a nuclear, as particularly when storms are getting worse because of Fukushima's, is climate change. I can explain that to you a little bit. But it was really interesting to see the crazies. Hurricane delivers another punishing blow. More than 900,000 did not have electricity and hundreds of thousands didn't have water. And then nuclear got to shut down at 70 miles per hour. And what Forbes is neglecting to tell you is that the majority of the telephone poles are blown down, which a nuclear power plant depends upon external gas, oil, and coal plants to run. And so within 50 to 90 minutes, it'll melt down without power. They usually only keep enough fuel on site for about 8 hours for the generator. The massive generator typically is very difficult to start up. So it was just the average price of residential electricity in the United States last year was 13.7 cents per kilowatt hour. Now they're paying 33 cents per kilowatt hour, but that's because of the transportation out there and because America put an embargo against Russia's fuel, which caused inflation worldwide. It's a dishonest argument. In 2017, the island was ravaged by Hurricane Irma. Now, we covered these and Maria back to back. In fact, some of those islands, including Puerto Rico, was over 200 miles per hour. They would have lost all the infrastructure regardless. Now, they know that Puerto Rico's not going to do it. The idea of the story is to try to make nuclear look good. It's not that they're really trying to get Puerto Rico a nuclear power plant. Hurricane Irma was over 180 miles per hour, 285 kilometers an hour. Hurricane Maria was 175 miles per hour sustained winds, which meant it was going to gust around 225, 250 miles per hour. 225 miles per hour wind gust means you're going to have meltdowns at these nuclear plants if you put one there. But what Forbes is trying to do is paint nuclear, even though they know it's ridiculous, they're trying to paint nuclear as another step above everything else, right? UK nuclear waste cleanup operation could cost $260 billion. $260 billion. For what? Donneray? Surely you're not talking about all of the reactors that's been sitting there. The non-decommission authority, United Kingdom, hasn't decommissioned a single plant. I don't know why they call it a decommission authority. They got 19 submarines, nuclear submarines there they ran away from, tied up. The non-decommission authority, who says it'll take them 315 years to clean up Donneray, which is one of their sites in Scotland, I guess, was a fuel reprocessing facility. It's so toxic they had to run away from it. And so instead of having nuclear students or nuclear academics or nuclear scientists there, they're hiring people just out of high school with no education and training them on the job. It's so evil, it defies any kind of rationale. How it could exist for all this time, and it's disappointing. It shows you the corruptions in your university is complete. It's absolute. The word safely and nuclear waste doesn't actually work together. You can't have a safe environment in nuclear waste. You can't make it safe. There's not every facet is going to release huge amounts into the environment, is what I mean by that, which lives for millions and millions of years. And they don't name the experts. When they mention the word experts, they don't get a name, which usually implies that people like Geraldine Thomas or Robert Gale or people notorious nuke cranks for the industry. As the government pursues nuclear energy, decades and decades without looking at it, and now they're closing all the reactors at the last second. Oh, well, we're going to have, we got to get nuclear. When renewables is curb stomping them everywhere they go. It's actually taken a huge leap backwards off a cliff. And it's toxic for millions of years. It's always hemorrhaging isotopes in your communities. The fuel pools is the scourge of all the species and humanity. The same as France, right? Where all the reactors are breaking down now. They don't have enough water to power the reactors, same as United Kingdom. And they're going to build a whole bunch more without the resources or the manpower, the educated manpower. Every facet of it is just so stupid. Will grow by $260 billion. Originally, I think it was $50 billion estimate, and just keeps climbing. International experts. That's like the scariest sentence imaginable when you're talking about nuclear. Is the second you heard the word group of international scum degenerate experts. Other sites are 11 nuclear power stations built between 1950 and 1970s, including Dungeness A in Kent, Hinkley Point A in Somerset. All of them are surrounded by farms. Every one of them. as far as you can see. All of them are hemorrhaging radiation for decades, poisoning everybody in the supermarkets. One thing uniform about nuclear is evilness. They got to do substantial work on one reactor site to make it safe so they can decommission it. Because they abandon all these places. The idea is to abandon it for 60, 70, 80 years. That's part of their plan. This is their brilliant plan. It's better to be a pedophile than it is a nuclear scientist or nuclear engineer. You got more credibility. Thomas told the International Nuclear Risk Assessment Group, International Nuclear Risk Assessment Group, who's never visited Fukushima, by the way, or Santa Susana, or Mayak, or any place really. It's just a name of controlled so you got controlled opposition. Their job is just to come out and lie to you, not to do anything, not to accomplish anything. Just to come out and lie to you and keep the same lie for 80 years. They got the education, the pedigree, everything, so that people are going to well, they got an incredible education, Dana. Yeah, exactly. They don't know the difference between a banana and a nuclear fuel rod. Deferred decommissioning for 85 years from shutdown. 85 years. The deferred decommissioning, not the next generation, the generation after that, but the generation after that. Responsible nuclear industry. That's vapor. Which was previous policy 85 years, not suitable for all the reactors because they're different ages, the physical conditions they're referring to as the neutron bombardment of the site and material. Usually 900 million tons of bombarded nuclear material, which is the whole site is, when they go to decommission it, it has to be put in a nuclear holding site. But that doesn't stop them from trying to recycle it into children's toys when you're not looking. And you're not looking. The buildings will just collapse before 85 years has passed. Because the neutron bombardment creates a Wigner effect that destroys the integrity of the metals, the cements, the material used, and makes it unbelievably dangerous environment. You can't not, it's impossible not to have huge releases as it deteriorates. 2005 case for decommissioning disposing of the radioactive waste. United Kingdom nuclear disease factories built in the 50s, 70s, 80s, 90s were put at 51 billion taxpayers' dollars. Last year, the NDA estimated rose to the non-decommission authorities. What that means, NDA? Like they're supposed to be the nuclear decommissioning authority, but we call them the non-decommission authority, hopefully as an insult, which is what it was when they were born. That was an insult. Estimates rose to 131 billion. Its latest annual report was 149 billion, and now it's estimated 260 billion. Do you think that's not going to change again real soon? Huh? Do you? Really? Do you? Researchers weigh in on Saskatchewan's small modular nuclear reactor concept. This is the Canadian Bullshit Corporation, the mouthpiece for the Canadian government, the CBC, who I've done 2 interviews with, by the way, that they didn't publish. Of course not. Saskatchewan Power. So first off, they want a memorandum of understanding with a small modular reactor that doesn't exist, rather than, and disregard the possibilities of everything else coming in the future. No, don't care. But it's going to be free, too cheap to meter power. It's not nuclear. Don't care. We got a memorandum of understanding for nuclear. And I got to look at any technology, tie the money up in nuclear. So shut up. Because Saskatchewan, one of the biggest uranium mine production places, and the best veins really on the planet. And so that province in Canada has been totally captured by the nuclear industry to the point of ludicrousness. It's totally captured too by the regulatory or the nuclear industry. And they stalked me all the way through Saskatchewan the last time I went through it. The entire time. There's 1 or 2 big pickup trucks riding me. Pulled in everywhere I pulled in. Never got out of their trucks. It's so stupid, it defies that this is humans we're talking about. Narrows down potential location for reactors to sites in Estevan and Elbow. No, I'm not making it up. This is the fabled fictional design overlooking probably the only pond in Saskatchewan on top of that. First off, it's got to run on a special fuel only made in Russia, the reactor they're talking about, right? It's mixed oxide fuel on top of that in order to get the power. They've been talking about it for 50 years. They still haven't even built one. It's a total fable. But there's a lot of studies showing huge issues with radioactive emissions. It produces an absurd amount of radioactive water they call tritium. So, which is a big problem with the CANDU reactors Canada designed. Stupid. It's just such a stupid design because it creates so much pollution. It creates an absurd amount of radioactive water every day. They don't contain any of it. Nothing. All of it gets discharged into one of the biggest freshwater systems on the planet. Again, every time you heard the word tritium, it's around 100 kilograms pre-nuclear in all the oceans combined worldwide. Sellafield and La Hague in France, in just a few decades, have produced over 5,000 pounds of tritium, which is anthropogenic, man-made tritium. It's totally different than natural. So the study about a severe accident to CANDU reactors, don't ask me how I got there, I forget. Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Chalk River, which is the first nuclear meltdown in 1955, acknowledged on the planet, I think. Currently, it's entombed. In other words, it's hemorrhaging into the environment. And then when it rains, it's even worse. And the environment being a major river flowing into the Great Lakes, which is the biggest freshwater reserve, a body of water on the entire planet. It's like 21% of the fresh water on the entire planet in that system, right? And it's surrounded by nuclear power plants too, by the way, on Americans and Canadian sides. all those lakes, the Great Lake, Lake Superior, Lake Ontario, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, Chalk River. These are about as honest as a used car salesman with a drug addiction and a gambling habit. Consider the no offense to any car salesman with drug addiction and gambling habits. Implication of tritium releases in the CANDU severe reactor, which we covered, that they had something like 34 million trillion becquerels as a safe release in a single release, which means they can do it again the next day too, which is enough to hide a serious accident, like a real serious event. But you can't just have tritium, see? It's absurd to suggest that the only thing in the equation is tritium. Reactors don't run on tritium. Tritium is a byproduct of the uranium, plutonium, and mixed oxide fuel. Heavy water moderated CANDU is produced in large quantities, which there's no way to contain it. It's all hemorrhaged into the environment. There's 18 of these reactors doing it in Canada. And it can't be just tritium. It's absurd. It's a ludicrous assertion to suggest that it's only tritium. It's so evil, right? It just defies logic it can even exist. Like to suggest it's a weak beta emitter is just disgusting, by the way. And betrayal is not weak at all. There's so much of it. And it's assimilated in its water, so it assimilates into your body and all species immediately, readily. And where it can sequester in the body for your entire lifespan. And the damage that it's doing is at a mind-boggling amount of damage, which what happens is your body is flooded with white blood cells because it's everywhere. It's assimilated in every facet of your body. So you're producing white blood cells at all your joints, not just your spleen, which overwhelms your immune system, leaves you more susceptible to illnesses and diseases and viruses and pathogens that were normally harmless. It is produced in large quantities by heavy water moderated CANDU reactors. High mobility of the tritiated steam. A large fraction of radionuclide inventory can be released to the environment, which is a contribution in inhalations doses can be significant. See, because earlier they said it's a mild beta. And then the next paragraph, get out your protection gear. Continued elevated airborne. Tritium concentrations in contaminated areas. How would you like if the crop duster started spraying in your neighborhoods all the time? Would freak you out, right? Because you can see the plane, hear the plane. You can smell the huge, massive emissions. But you can't when it comes to this. And it can travel. This can travel for 12 years, 120 years, looking for a victim. It's not just tritium. It can't be, what made it contaminated in the first place, which is what they call tritiated tritium water. It was the fission products, right? It's very, very, very worrisome. And you can't find it with the gamma. The gamma measurement-based operational intervention levels can miss this contribution. Your gamma's not going to pick up plutonium or uranium or americium or neptunium or strontium, terrible, debilitating elements that are released constantly from the fuel pools of over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. I don't expect people to find me because Google don't send me out, right? So the nuclear scientists, pedo comment, Chelsea. I don't remember what the comment went. I apologize for it if it offended you. But I think the comment was only meant to articulate how much disrespect you should have for nuclear academics, nuclear scientists. I suggest if a nuclear scientist goes to jail, they tell people they're a pedo. Is that it? They're mass murderers. How am I supposed to retract that? I'm confused. Source term investigation for prolonged loss of cooling accidents for a typical CANDU spent fuel pool. So they were talking about if they're doing maintenance, they got to take the fuel out of the pool or out of the reactor, all of it, and put it in a pool, which is a burden to the pool at the one time. And so the pool's going to boil off a lot of more water than it was intended to boil off each day, right? Spent fuel pool accident. Significant concern after Fukushima was raised on the potential of radioactive releases from a spent fuel pool accident. Well, the concern should have been there when they designed it, right? Why would you put fuel pools over the reactors so that if you had an event, you can't get to the fuel pools because of the gamma shines, X-rays, and neutrons, the lethal doses, sustained forever. Which meant that you would have heat, and that the heat then would cause the fuel pools to detonate too. There was no way to avoid it. You couldn't avoid it. And at the top of the building, first off, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. Let's keep her going. It never stops right here. When a full quart is added to the fuel pool, then in a shorter time than normal, refueling discharge, a prolonged loss of cooling is postulated in order to boil and evaporate the water. The cladding of the fuel bundles accidentally entered in the air will be progressively heated and then degraded. Fission products will release into the atmosphere to spent fuel pool into the environment through the existing junctions. Well, there's no containment. It's always, everything is vented into the environment. That's why they're surrounded by farms. So the farms suck up a big percentage of it close by, which gives the nuclear power plant a good record of not too much radiation in the local environment. It's until you go to the supermarket with the Geiger counter and find out that everybody's being poisoned. I don't know. Let's try this again. Investigation for release of the cesium, which is the British pronunciation, for accidental ejection of fuel bundles from the channel during refueling. The partial or total loss of cooling has a significant potential to evolve to uncovering of the fuel bundles, followed by cladding failure, zirconium cladding, release of the radioactive isotopes in the spent fuel pool room. Like, this is all vented into the environment all the time. The pools boil off about 100, typically, like in a boiling water reactor, which is boils about 120,000 liters a day into the environment from the spent fuel pools. And each liter is saturated with isotopes because the fuel, so the spent fuel pool is still splitting the atoms. It's generating heat, which is splitting the atoms, which can give you cancers and heart problems and liver problems and lung problems. Release of radioactive isotopes into the spent fuel pool room, where everything is vented up those tall, skinny stacks. They're talking about excess compared to their normal allotment. The decayed heat produced by the fuel bundle is removed by the dedicated cooling system, limited to the maximum capacity of the pump. The heat is produced by splitting atoms. The atoms is absorbed into the water evaporates, and then the atoms are released into the environment. So still producing the same amount of atoms it produces for the power of 1 million homes. It's just not under pressure and temperature anymore, but it's still splitting the same atoms. And the amount of atoms we're talking about is absurd. Absurd being, you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But each one is capable of harming you, or an insect, or a bird, or an animal, or a mammal, in increments over time, and a lot of it in a short time. The more is in your body, each atom that sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, your body attacks it with white blood cells, which displaces the red blood cells, that's carrying oxygen and nutrition throughout your body, which leaves you more susceptible. Your immune system's compromised, right? But that's sustained for the rest of your life. It's not like a cut where you cut your finger and for 7 days you got more white blood cells being produced that displaces reds. And so you're less energy, you're more lethargic, you're more susceptible to diseases and pathogens and viruses in the environment. After a while, the fuel on the top tray will be uncovered. If they're uncovered, the zirconium cladding catches fire. Starts melting down the fuel rods inside of it because of the intense fire from the zirconium burning. The fuel starts burning. The water now starts boiling and more fuel is uncovered, and now you got a chain reaction going on in the fuel pool, like happened at Fukushima in 4 buildings and the common spent fuel pool. And they won't acknowledge either one of them. But when you look at the documentation, radioactive releases from CANDU power reactors during an end fitting failure postulated accident. Radioactive releases from the Canadian reactor during end fitting failure. So the case of an intact bundle, broken bundle in the separate intact fuel pins, and broken bundles with broken pins. So the time of the releases of iodine, xenon, and krypton to the atmosphere. because CANDU reactors are using pure uranium-238 and bombarding it with neutrons. And what's the other reactor that does that? By the way, they're very harmful isotopes, and they're produced in large quantities too. But there's many, many, many more serious isotopes produced at the same time. Belgium turns off nuclear reactor despite energy crisis. Well, they had a law that said they can only operate for 40 years. That's the law. And so they turned it off, which was a proper law because of the embrittlement of all the infrastructure from neutron bombardment, gamma shines, and X-rays, right? That was the original charter. For most nuclear plants was 30 years, not 40 years. Another part of the charter was they wouldn't release any isotopes into the environment. And so everybody that used to work at a nuclear plant would change their clothes to go to work and take it off when they left and put on their street clothes, right? And they would have to get a shower. They would have to be checked for radioactive contaminants. And if found like 3 becquerels going off on them, a man-made, then they would be scrubbed down so nothing got into the environment. That was the original, what they used to do. Because they seen the harm that these cause. Venting Medusas. That's so freaking funny, man. You know, which reminds me of the T-shirts on my site. I'll show you to you. Wait now. Because I took down a whole lot of my merchandise 5 days ago or something. And so the links to them are not supposed to exist anymore, right? I'll show you what they've done. Because they don't want to put up the T-shirts. The industry is messing big time with that merchandise. Let me bring it up for you. You'll get a kick out of it, hopefully. So the poll, Japan assassinated former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at a state funeral. Well, some people think he should, but we don't agree with it. But everybody's entitled to an opinion. So if you go to my site, you know, you got videos, but you see store. So click on store, and you get a load of what they've done here. Because none of these shirts actually exist anymore. Here you can see they use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shirts, the same shirts, in order to fill up the page, that they don't even exist anymore. And Save the Whales, which is surprising that one showed up. But when you click on even Moms and Pies, they don't exist anymore because I'm going to redo them, right? But here are the shirts that do exist. They don't show up on my page. Nuclear Scumbag Show with Dana Durnford, Atoms for Degenerates, is not supposed to be the name of that one. It's supposed to be Nuclear Power is a Hate Crime. But you can see, Save the Whales, Ban Nuclear Power Plants. Save the Whales, Ban Nuclear Power Plants, that shows up down there. Pro-nuclear is a hate crime. Save the Insects, Ban Nuclear. Nuclear power plants, disease factories. You can only put so many words in the title, so it's not going to reflect what's actually on the shirt. Pro-nuclear is a hate crime. And Atoms for Degenerates, Save the Whales, Ban Nuclear Power. Nuclear power plants are disease factories. pro-nuclear is a hate crime. Let's see if that loads up very quick for us. Yeah, pro-nuclear is a hate crime. And then on the back of it, pro-nuclear is a hate crime, or on the front of it rather, and that's the back of it right there. And so you got every size you could ever want. You got all the different colors. You got lots of fancy colors and all the different sizes. But each color might not have all the sizes. And so it might give you another option. Oh yeah, it gives you even 5 times large, for goodness sakes. Wow. But anyway, that doesn't show up on my front page, right? Should Japan assassinate former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, get a state funeral? I don't think he should, because he poisoned everybody worldwide. So anyway, Belgium had a law that says after 40 years you got to turn off the reactor, and so the media's gone crazy worldwide because Belgium's going to turn off the reactor, and the energy crisis is caused by all of these same countries' medias putting an embargo against Russia, not Russia putting an embargo against them. And then they interviewed Xeon Light, and I spammed her last night with Twitter. I spammed her, but I hit her really good with Twitter over and over. There's a global energy... What a disgusting maggot she turned out to be. She was a Manchurian candidate. She was in Extinction Rebellion in the United Kingdom. She was the unofficial spokesperson the media turned to. She wasn't an official spokesperson, but the media went to her and she said she was part of Extinction Rebellion. Then she jumped sides. Now, she admitted to stop an Extinction Rebellion from protesting nuclear power in the United Kingdom. And then she came out as a full-blown double agent, part of the Environmental Progress nuclear lobbying group out of the States, ran by despicable Michael Schellenberg. Disgusting Schellenberg. Belgium shuts down nuclear reactors despite energy doubts. We've covered Xeon Light quite a few times. She's despicable. She's like Rod Adams with boobies. Just a disgusting maggot. Belgium shut nuclear reactors on Friday amid energy crunch. That's the law. The Dole 3 nuclear reactor. But when you actually look up the Dole 3 nuclear reactor, it looks like this, surrounded by farms. The fuel pool is still going to be hemorrhaging radiation to those farms for another 60 years. It's disgusting, isn't it? Almost every single nuclear plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Unless the communities are taking up the land, which is incredibly evil to build it in the community. Shouldn't be on the planet. Nuclear power plants shouldn't be on this planet. Repowering decommissioned nuclear plant would be a major success story. This is Paladin, is it? Palestade. I probably butchered it. In the United States, which is already supposed to be starting the decommissioning. And the owners are, no, throw a couple of $1 billion at us. We'll get it up and running again. It's the easiest way to find evil. If you want to do an exorcist, you have to go to a nuclear power plant because it's surrounded with evil. This is hilarious. a engineering student at the University of Utah said that if their football team didn't win, she was going to blow up the research reactor. Now, we showed the studies where the sex ratios within 10, 15 miles of a research reactor was more males being born than females, which the only way that happens is everybody's being polluted to have that kind of statistic. And the only reason you would do a study like that is because you know everybody is radiated from the endless releases, which is surprising because these little small energy, so-called small, compared to the big ones, these are, you wouldn't think you were going to get that kind of emissions that would cause that kind of statistics. And so they charged her, and the judge let her out on $5,000 bail. So the university employee notified the police about a message posted on a private messaging app. And they don't explain how they knew that message existed. And Meredith, a senior majoring, was identified and said that it was just meant as a joke. It was an obvious joke. They charged her anyway. The judge got no choice and gave her $5,000 bail, which means that the judge doesn't take it serious. So it doesn't matter if you're capable or not, they got to charge you because it's a nuke plant and it's considered terrorism to threaten to cause damage to it. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. So, like, if you do set off a dirty bomb, because it's not illegal to poison people with radiation, you can win in court. Which is what we've seen happening, right? Because it's actually not illegal to poison you with radiation. Otherwise, they can't murder you in the hospitals with chemo, radioactive chemo, and radiation protons and everything else. People's Defense, a little over a year ago, in Myanmar, is it? I can't remember. We'll see in a second. I missed the headline on that story by the looks of it. It's in the comments section anyway. A little over a year ago, when resistant fighters collectively known as the People's Defense Forces started fighting back against what they're calling a dictatorship down there, who apparently is going to be getting nuclear. So I wanted to show you how crazy the nuclear industry actually is, that they're even in talk with these types of people. They started fighting back against the regime. They're armed with homemade guns, you'll get the story in a second, and rudimentary hunting rifles. And today, many resistant groups are employing drones to bomb military targets on both land and water. So they're using drones. These are very expensive drones. So this is the government's drones, I think. There. Don't quote me, though. People Defense Forces are also using drones against the junta, which is the Myanmar ruling coalition or something. 5 regime soldiers were killed in a resistance drone attack in Karen State on Wednesday. We'll get there in a second. Nuclear ambitions reaffirmed. Junta-controlled Ministry of Science and Technology will establish a Nuclear Information Technology Center in Yangon, Myanmar. Yeah, Myanmar. military regime, which was assigned to gauge and influence the public opinion on nuclear energy. Influence the public's opinion preferential. Myanmar's bid to acquire nuclear technology dates back to the time of former military dictator Than Shweig, who also sought to build a nuclear research center with the help of Russia. The latest plans for a power plant follows the regime's recent signing of a nuclear roadmap with Russia's state-owned nuclear agency, degenerate Rosatom, including also implementations of a modular reactor project in Myanmar. It's the same thing as Britain took their nuclear weapons to Australia to try them out because they didn't want to radiate their own country, right? So when you see these impoverished countries being offered nuclear technology, it's always new and always comes with huge risk and big emissions. It's pretty disgusting. But that regime is the right word for it, too. And production of nuclear weapons. So this is the resistance, which are starting almost better dressed than the actual country's military. So anybody who helps them will face the death penalty. Speaking at the same press conference, he threatened supporters of the parallel national utility government with charges punishable by death. So there's no left, right, center political parties. There's a junta. And they're going to have nuclear. And net citizens who like and share Facebook posts of the NUG and its affiliates face charges carrying up to 10 years in prison for liking a Facebook post. Welcome to stupid. How many views did we get on our last, views? We get no views, of course. How many seconds did they change my video, my last video? 150.57. 150.57. 150.57. And so 151.6. So it's 9 minutes longer. 9 minutes longer. Wow. So they changed my video after 12 hours. Makes it longer or shorter. They don't do that to anybody else's video. Here's the censorship today. Hi, everybody. We got Kim Jong-un in the comments section. Wow. I feel so privileged. A question and answer with Bill Gates, the nuclear project CEO. Now, Bill Gates has never been to the site. I don't know why they keep saying the word Bill Gates. It's so stupid, isn't it? It's so ridiculous. TerraPower will build its Tritium demonstrator reactor at a retiring coal plant in Wyoming. So why not put geothermal there instead? Oh, and they're claiming they're also going to have energy storage on site, which I'm assuming is this. It's batteries. Enough for 2 hours, they're saying. just crazy. It's so stupid. And in the middle of it, you got 2 park benches. in the middle, surrounded by windmills. And in the very middle of it is 2 park benches in the middle of a nuke plant. If you understood how evil that actually is, it's the last spot you want to be sitting outdoors. The nuclear company started by Bill Gates, and he started it up and then he gave it over to the nuke tarts. And Bill Gates is never going to go there. He's not going to be sitting in the office at the nuclear. It's not even going to happen. So like all the other scams, it's just meant to keep using the word Bill Gates every time you talk about it. It's so pathetic. There's like 300 companies out there doing the same thing, but none of them are that desperate for recognition. Bill Gates, like, it's so absurd every time they say the word Bill Gates, as if Bill Gates got something to do with the design or the working or anything else. If Bill Gates is so infatuated with it, why didn't he just throw all the money down? Not like he didn't have it. How comes, again, right, going to build it at a retiring coal plant because you want to demonize coal desperately. Coal is probably the best thing we got because the planet is full of it, right? And if you don't build it in a community, you're okay. The coal emissions don't surround the planet pulsing energy every second like radiation does from nuke plants. The first of its kind, not only in Wyoming, but in the United States. Will replace a retired... Well, first off, you don't even have a working model. It's not going to replace the coal mine for at least 30 years. You got to get the kinks out of it. It's strictly public relation. And they're part of the government, right? And it's going to have energy storage. You don't explain what that is. 500 megawatts for a few hours each day. Energy storage. But you can't have storage for wind, solar, or any other renewable. But you can get it for nuclear, right? You got any idea how insidiously monstrous they have scuttled and gutted renewables over the last 20 or 30 years? If they didn't constantly destroy nuclear, we would have already been all renewable worldwide. They raised $750 million because the government is backing them up. The government. The American government. Partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy. So we think electricity demand is going to double by 2050. We think. And the reason they're saying that is because electric cars. It's the same song and dance everywhere you go. Why did the company choose Wyoming for the first project? Because that was the only one they could get for next to nothing. And then the Inflation Reduction Act that just came out for $1 trillion promotes nuclear. And lots of tax incentives, lots of tax write-offs and everything else for people who want to invest in it. So they've given nuclear every advantage over everything for decades and decades. And all it done was exterminated the majority of the planet from the constant emissions. So back to Myanmar for 1 second. So they were shot at, some of their soldiers were shot at. So they drove 10,000 peasants off their land, they're going to have nuclear power in a few years if Russia gets his way. 12 soldiers were killed in a resistance ambush. Over 10,000 residents from 20 villages had to flee because the military showed up. So they go in, they rape the women and children in these impoverished communities, and the sons and the uncles and parents and everybody else become resistance, see? And then he says, oh, there's resistance over there, let's burn it to the ground. There was a 77-year-old man was killed, and 10 houses were burnt down. That's called collective punishment. It's a war crime. It's illegal, right? A 100 troops invaded the town after 12 soldiers were killed. And 6 were killed in another ambush. Which, that's the only way you can fight back. They're not fighting back because they're bored. And it's irrelevant. I don't know the whole story, but obviously there's something going on that needed to will not get sorted out without exterminating the opposers, right? So this is empire building. But to give this country nuclear is a serious mistake. It's a serious crimes against humanity. So topic, civil disobedience movement. For having, not tolerating any dissent whatsoever, we'd give Myanmar an F, an absolute failure. And to suggest that they get nuclear is just frightening. Myanmar military defector reveals how junta killed school kids. So the list goes on and on. The school was out in the field, so it's not surrounded by forest or something like that. And the kids were playing outside, the teacher says, and the Russian helicopters, which are used by the Myanmar government, came in and bombed them. Fired rockets at them. It's just a terrible story. Myanmar shouldn't be getting... We have to keep an eye on that and resist Myanmar, and certainly anybody from getting nuclear, but Myanmar definitely shouldn't have it. Advanced nuclear moves beyond water and into salt. This is Matthew Wald wrote the article. Anybody remember who Matthew Wald is? From Fukushima, I should say. He showed up at Stanford University a month after Fukushima. And so Stanford is full of nuclear academics, nuclear scientists, nuclear engineers, you name it. Oodles of them. Rather than use them, they used Matthew Wald to explain nuclear and explain Fukushima instead of one of the thousands of experts they have at their fingertips. They use Matthew Wald. And it was really shitty, really. So he's talking about a not so new type of reactor. Molten salt reactors. and he's trying to sell it, right? Now, we go back to Matthew Wald for a second. He was a reporter for 38 years at the New York Times, where he covered climate, energy, and other subjects. He was a policy analyst and communications consultant for 6 years at the Nuclear Energy Institute. The Nuclear Energy Institute. We've covered them. They're disgusting, right? So it was really weird when Stanford University, 30 days after Fukushima, rolled out Matthew Wald and Bert Richards. And so they had all their diagrams, but they also done Matthew. Got a bunch of videos. I got a bunch of little video clips.
Here what we have is that upside down light bulb is the containment. That's the thing we think is intact in units 1 and 3 and damaged in unit 2. It's bottled up tight, as you can't there. It is a lot smaller containment and thinner containment than a pressurized water reactor, but it's believed to be adequate because it's got a couple of useful. One of them is at the bottom, you see that circuit part, we're looking at it in cross-section. It's called the web torus, and it's half full of water. It's got about 1 million gallons of water in it.
Okay, sorry about that. Now, the audio is shitty. It's 11 years ago. It's from a Stanford webcast. They webcast into the audience. Instead of bringing in a nuclear academic, they used Matthew Wald to talk about multiple nuclear meltdowns, who happened to work after it for the Nuclear Energy Institute.
At the moment of shutdown, you're producing about 6% as much heat as when you were running, because you've got lots and lots of very short, several seconds, several minutes, several hours, and as the atoms seek stability, they're throwing off a gamma ray or an alpha or beta particle, they give off heat. Decreases pretty quickly, but you have a very substantial heat load at the beginning, and
Let me do that.
At the moment of shutdown, you're producing about 6% as much heat as when you were running, because you've got lots and lots of
very short-lived isotopes is what he's trying to say. Because that's his audio doing that.
Several seconds, several minutes, several hours.
And some last in seconds, minutes, or hours. This is madness. You got Matthew Wald. Matthew Wald, a reporter from the New York Times, at a university with nuclear experts. And rather than use the nuclear experts, you're going to use Matthew Wald to explain Fukushima. And he starts off with isotopes that last for seconds, minutes, or hours.
And as the atoms seek stability, they're throwing off a gamma ray or an alpha or beta particle, they give off heat. It decreases pretty quickly, but you have a very substantial heat load at the beginning, and
bear with me, it'll make sense.
In this picture, we also see in this picture the spent fuel pool. If you see the head of the reactor, you see to the right of that is the spent fuel pool. And the way you refuel this thing is, over the head of the reactor, we've got a lid on the primary containment, and over that, we've got some concrete blocks. You use the crane, shown here, parked on the right, that red thing. It rolls over, picks up the blocks, removes the top of the containment, removes the vessel head. Now, all that has to be done underwater because it's the radiation field is so high. So during refueling, you flood the area over those blocks. The crane then will pluck out individual fuel assemblies and move them over to the spent fuel pool. You may have heard about this design that one of the problems is the spent fuel pool is up in the air. This has some advantages. You're able to move the stuff quickly. The amount of time you spend moving each individual assembly is quite short. That keeps your outage short. The disadvantage is in case of earthquake or in case of Muhammad Atta in the 757 or various other problems, the theory is that that pool is a little more vulnerable.
He's talking about Muhammad Atta from 911. Flying a plane into a spent fuel pool at the top of the buildings with no containment. This is propaganda on a different level, right? This is official propaganda. It's absurd that he done that, by the way.
Next slide, please. These are before you could blow up when they had hydrogen that they were trying to vent from the plane. We're, of course, looking at a cutaway view here. The secondary containment up on the top, that's the thing that blew up when they had hydrogen that they were trying to vent from the primary containment to the exterior, but ended up in the secondary containment again. Before you can clean this up, before you can defuel that reactor, you're going to have to rebuild that secondary containment. Let's go on to the next slide, please.
That's 30 days after. I'll show you what he's talking about. That's 30 days after, folks. We're going to play that again, but just wait till I show you what he's talking about. He said the hydrogen exploded at the top of the containment, because that's where the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. This was a 190-foot building. There is no top to the building, right? That's the remains of Reactor 3. Here's what the buildings would look like when he was talking, though. I'll show you about. He's referring to Reactor 4 and Reactor 3, where the containment destroyed the top of the building was also Reactor 1. That's a stunning statement he just made. So he said they're going to have to rebuild the containment before they can move the fuel out of the pool. And this is what they claim it looked like at the top of Reactor 4, because they claim they rebuilt it, right? This is super important, because this is 30 days after. And they came up with, that was the cover story. Now, Helen Caldicott is asked, that video up there, I put the two pictures here. This is what Reactor 4 looked like. And this is what they said it looked like, aka rebuilt it. So she was asked in an interview, did it really look like the picture to your left? This is Helen Caldicott. She wrote 14 anti-nuclear books.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
That's Helen Caldicott. Nobody's outraged over Helen Caldicott. Nobody wants Helen Caldicott to retract that statement.
Next slide, please. These are before you could blow up when they had hydrogen that they were trying to vent from the plane. We're, of course, looking at a cutaway view here. The secondary containment up on the top, that's the thing that blew the exterior, but ended up in the secondary containment again. Before you can clean this up, before you can defuel that reactor, you're going to have to rebuild that secondary containment. Let's go on to the next slide, please.
That's like wow stuff, man. How much other things was he tasked with covering up is the question there, isn't it?
Over to the spent fuel pool. You may have heard about this design that one of the problems is the spent fuel pool is up in the air. This has some advantages. You're able to move the stuff quickly. The amount of time you spend moving each individual assembly is quite short. That keeps your outage short. The disadvantage is in case of earthquake or in case of Muhammad Atta in a 757 or various other problems. Anyway, here, this is a good image of both the primary containment and the secondary containment. We're, of course, looking at a cutaway view here. The secondary containment up on the top, that's the thing that blew up when they had hydrogen that they were trying to vent from the primary containment to the exterior, but ended up in the secondary containment again.
Well, the tsunami came through the site. It wiped out all the infrastructure. They weren't trying to vent anything. There was no infrastructure. It blows me away. Now, the building blew up. You couldn't get close to it. You couldn't get back in the control room for 7 years. You remember a tsunami ran right through the site. 680 kilometers of the coastline looked like that. There was no infrastructure to vent anything, see? It's a complete fable they were venting.
Before you can clean this up, before you can defuel that reactor, you're going to have to rebuild that secondary containment.
You're going to have to That's an incredible statement 30 days in. That's exactly 30 days after. That's the cover story right there. Matthew Wald.
I showed you previously my show and tell, our little pellet here. The pellets sit in those rods. The rods are bundled together, and the whole thing is wrapped in a zirconium sheath. Both the rod and that bigger wrapper. Zirconium is not chosen for its strength. It's not chosen because it's chemically inert. It ain't. It's chosen because it's transparent to neutrons, and the whole purpose is to multiply the population until you have a lot of neutrons that will carry on the chain reaction. This is what, by the way, this is what sits in spent fuel pools. Go on to the next slide, please.
This is what sits in the spent fuel pools that were lost.
This sequence, I think this was circulated by the Nuclear Energy Institute, the industry's main trade association here.
Who he worked for 6 years. After. This is what got him the job. It's what he done and is doing is the cover story. It's shocking. Stanford University, what a betrayal. With all those nuclear experts, they rolled out Matthew Wald from the New York Times.
Fission products, all the things that the uranium was broken up into, the highly radioactive stuff, the cesium, the strontium, the iodine, etc. We're starting to spread that over the whole plant. Go on to the next slide.
So now he's claiming it's limited to the plant. Did you catch that?
Fission products, all the things.
This is 30 days later. There's WIC, and then there's the Nuclear Energy Institute, and people like useful idiots like Matthew Wald. So this is 30. Yeah, this is exactly 1 month later. This model is based on 16 days of radioactive fallout covering the planet in 16 days. It's based on venting, but there was no way to vent. There was no infrastructure. And the tsunami tore the infrastructure out of 680 kilometers of the coastline. once it started, one of them started melting down, you couldn't do nothing, right? So he's claiming it's staying at the plant, but here's the Francis model.
Down there is some concrete, and this could turn into a problem because if you heat concrete enough, it'll give off hydrogen and carbon monoxide, and those can combine explosively.
Did you hear that statement? If you heat up the cement, it causes the hydrogen. The hydrogen is caused from the fuel melting down. Right? That's what caused the hydrogen. He's blaming it on cement to avoid acknowledging the meltdown, see? It's wicked. They couldn't get a nuclear scientist at Stanford to come out and say the stuff, probably, is what happened, right? So they used degenerate Matthew Wald.
We're also looking here at...
That's a degenerate on a whole different scale. Whoever wrote that at the Nuclear Energy Institute and gave it to him.
So here we have the spent fuel pool on the top right, and if it was empty, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission seems to think it was empty at one point. It's generating heat, it boiled off, they didn't get any more water in there in time. The cladding on those rods also generated hydrogen, and that's how you got a hydrogen explosion in Unit 4, where there was no fuel in the actual vessel.
First off, when you're changing the fuel in the vessel, you only take about a third of it out. You leave the rest there. Right, that was the cover story. And he also mentioned hydrogen from the fuel rods, right? Like, disgusting is not the appropriate word. It's despicable.
What's going on today, which is a few hours ago, the Japanese announced they're going to plan evacuations in a more leisurely fashion at greater distances. This is kind of disturbing. It's not because of acute exposures. It's because they dumped so much long-lived radioactive material, probably cesium, in the area that it's not safe to occupy it for long periods. So you'd be fine there for a day or a week, but if you're going to spend year after year there, your dose will be too high.
They're not evacuating because they got to. It's because if you spend a year there, it could be harmful. He's like Dutch Sink, right? Where he's reading a script. And Dutch is a good guy compared to him. And trust me, Dutch Sink is not a good guy. He's a disgusting maggot with the industry. But what Matthew Wald is doing is trying to stab everybody in the planet in the throat, in the thyroid.
So you'd be fine there for a day or a week, but if you're going to spend year after year there, your dose will be too high. We're now talking about either a massive cleanup challenge or land abandonment, a la Chernobyl, at least.
Why is the New York Times journalist talking about explaining the nuclear meltdowns at a university full of nuclear academics and nuclear professors and nuclear scientists and nuclear engineers? You should hear the people in the audience laughing on cue.
In some hotspots. The other thing is that the Japanese are preparing to upgrade their assessment of this accident on the 7-point international scale. At the moment, it's at 5, which is where...
So, 1 month after, was still on a 5 of a scale of 7 for meltdowns. Multiple reactors, all of them infinitely larger than Chernobyl. With decades of reactor cores at the top that caught fire and evaporated and poisoned the planet.
3 Mile Island was, and they're about to reclassify it as 7, which is the...
So, right then it was only equal to 3 Mile Island in the first 30 days, folks. That's heartbreaking. I can't take another second of it.
most serious serious and where Chernobyl was. One of the differences is most of this radiation was spread locally or spread over the ocean. Chernobyl...
Say most of it was spread locally and then over the ocean. I showed you the models. Like, my goodness.
Spread radioactive materials over enormous land areas.
So now when he says Chernobyl spread it over enormous area and land, he still doesn't acknowledge the fallout coverage.
Areas that were not very well prepared for it.
Nobody's prepared for it. Radioactive fallout. Nobody was prepared. And claiming that Fukushima was local. My God, boy. Stanford University, really?
Radiation was spread locally or spread over the ocean. Chernobyl spread radioactive materials over enormous land areas.
Covered the whole planet, same as Fukushima. But Fukushima was infinitely worse. There's Bert.
Thank you, Matt. I've never done a duet like this.
He's an actually nuclear expert, but he's not going to talk about Fukushima. He's going to talk about the future of nuclear.
We'll see how it goes. I want to do a little bit more about Fukushima, and then I'm going to switch gears and go talk about the future of nuclear.
In other words, let Matt, don't want to contradict Matthew's propaganda, all right? So just go ahead and promote nuclear. So Stanford University really did stab you in the back. They really, really did. Now, one of the links that he was providing, radiation dose comparator. So I put that link, I looked for that link and found it. That's what it looked like, but there's a lot going on there, right? Sleeping next to somebody, eating bananas. Now, they had some pretty good comparisons there, but sleeping next to somebody or living within 50 miles of a nuclear plant or eating a banana, it shouldn't be there. Living within 50 miles of a coal plant shouldn't be there. Using the CRT monitor for a year shouldn't be there. This is insidious propaganda, folks. So like I said, he couldn't get a professor or a nuclear scientist at Stanford to do it, so they got Matthew Walls, I guess. It's surreal that somebody would suggest is like a CRT computer screen is equal to inhaling plutonium or uranium fission products. Or that sleeping next to somebody is equal to inhaling nuclear fallout from a meltdown. Or eating a banana, the ultimate insult. Spending one day higher than average natural background radiation, like on a Colorado plateau. There's microsieverts, 1.2 microsieverts. Dental x-rays, 5 microsieverts. Extra from spending one day in a higher than average, we already covered that. On an average person over one normal day, 10 microsieverts. Of course, this is ludicrous. You can't equate natural, harmless, everyday stuff. Social nuclear engineer. James is on a roll today, man. Using a cell phone transmitter does not produce ionizing radiation, but it does cause cancer. It can cause cancer to the brain and the lips and throat and stuff like that. If you read the instructions on your cell phone, it says, do not come in contact with your head. So imagine a poor child. Doses from spending an hour on the grounds of Chernobyl. 6 microsieverts, or millisieverts, 6,000 microsieverts, but varies widely. Chest CT scans equal 7,000 microsieverts. This is hardcore. Maximum yearly dose permitted for U.S. radiation worker, 50,000 microsieverts. I'm not sure what the dots are supposed to represent. 2 to 1 or something. Doses causing symptoms of radiation poisoning if received in a short time. 400,000 microsieverts, 400 millisieverts, but varies. 2 sieverts, severe radiation poisoning, and usually fatal radiation poisoning is 4 sieverts. The site is full of places with 10 sieverts at Fukushima. And this chart was made up partly by a nuclear power plant operator. They go there with a high school degree and then they get on-the-job training for 4 years. They get their operator's license. So you got to be an incredible propagandist to get the job. Fatal doses, even with treatment, 8 sieverts. "10 minutes next to Chernobyl core, 50 sieverts." You're dead before your 10 minutes is up. It's more than 50 sieverts. Extra dose to Tokyo in a week following Fukushima, 40 microsieverts. Living in a stone, brick, cement building for a year is equal to 70 microsieverts. See, you can't equate natural stuff with man-made. It's a complete fraud. When you're talking about radioactive fallout, you can't measure it in microsieverts or millisieverts. You're supposed to measure atomic decays, becquerels, atoms, physical atoms. 3 mile on, and they said 80 microsieverts within 10 miles. And consider a microsievert 150. I'm not sure what the exact number is. Different for each element, right? So say it's 150 atoms per microsievert. Just one of them can make you sick in increments over time. I'm just going to flash through it so it's on the screen for anybody who wants to see the propaganda later. It's an absurd amount of propaganda these people like to put out. And that was the full size of it, scrolling 1, 2, and then 3 to cover all of the. And the links are all to the non-regulatory agencies. The Marshall Islands call off talk after U.S. response on nuclear legacy. And the Marshall Islands detonated huge nuclear megaton weapons there. And so one of them, Castle Bravo, the Castle series known as Castle Bravo, was equal to over 1,000 Nagasaki bombs worth of radiation going off at one time. It was like a 5,000 square mile lethal zone from radioactive fallout on the ocean itself. And so United States is not quick to answer their phone calls, right? They abandon them in a nuclear wasteland. Now they want to take it over again. So the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, which ignored Fukushima, has recommended people seek shelter inside a brick or cement building to avoid radiation fallout in case of a nuclear explosion, because a wooden house can't protect you. So how can a paper suit protect the homeless at Fukushima? And because conditioner accumulates radiation to your scalp, West works to deepen sanctions, which is why you have inflation right now, is because of the sanctions. And the media is trying to spin it months later that Russia refused to give you fuel, but it wasn't. It was sanctions from the countries. This is India. And they're giving school kids models of a nuclear plant. It's surreal. See the adults on both sides, and you got the children in the center. Next generation of nuclear being brainwashed right there. The Deputy General Manager of Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, Mumbai, handed a model of a nuclear power plant to scientists at the Bahara Atomic Research Center. Through the model, the children will learn about the technology used in electricity generation through nuclear energy, said officials. And there's a lot of them, right? So nuclear plants could be used to produce electricity without causing pollution. How's that work? Well, it doesn't. You can't do that. You can't use nuclear without endless pollution. And then once you start filling up the fuel pool, they're still splitting the atoms. So it's pollution in just evilness overdrive. He says nuclear power is safe, green, pollution-free. This is ludicrous. This is absurdness to suggest it. Can be used for peace. You can't use genocide machines, disease factories, and call it for peace. And you can't use it for agriculture or health or to treat cancer. It's absurd. I got a poll tonight. Should Japan's assassinated evil former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe get a state funeral? And 88% says no, of course not, which is the right answer. He shouldn't get a state funeral. He poisoned the whole planet with food from a nuclear wasteland, and that might never stop. He's responsible for making hundreds of millions of people sick already, and who knows how many dying from it. Paceline and Southern Nuclear gear up to support Boys and Girls Club. Again, how can you... This is a cancer run. The children are going to ride bikes they were just given in a cancer run to raise money for cancer caused by the same nuclear plants that gave them the money. So, Paceline, a fundraising organization for Georgia Cancer Center, partnered with Southern Nuclear Power to raise money. Southern Nuclear is the reason all these kids are dying, for goodness sakes. nuclear attack would cause political destruction. The first thing I was like, well, I don't agree with it, but let's go ahead and do it. My sense of humor, sometimes people gets offended by it, but you shouldn't, right? And you're not the one that's sitting here putting all this together every day. You're not the one that's got to read through all the diseases and misery and evil. It's going to be like it's... And stuff doesn't just show up here and I sit there and I know everything and just walk through it. I have to do an absurd amount of work before I can sit here and do a video. It's a nutty amount of work. It's a brutal, disgusting amount of work. Hungary's not going to support sanctions against Russia because they don't want inflation to ruin their country. The United Kingdom sets out plan for nuclear and hits out at 12 years of failure under the Tories. It's so crazy when you hear these people. Would allow the UK to be free from being exposed to dictators like Vladimir Putin. Well, first off, you put an embargo against Russia. That's why you're paying everybody can't afford to feed their children or heat their homes, is because you folks put an embargo, not the people. The people wouldn't say, well, we want inflation because Russia invaded Ukraine. Everybody should have put an embargo against the United Kingdom when they invaded Iraq. Current spike in global gas prices. Invasion of Ukraine led to a current spike. No, it didn't lead to the current spike. The embargoes by NATO and UN countries did. That's what led to the spike. A handful of politicians committing sedition behind closed doors and putting hundreds of millions of people into poverty. And then trying to blame it on Russia when you done it in order to allegedly punish Russia for something that you were doing. So they set out a massive package of tax cuts in the hope of reviving a sluggish economy. It's not as sluggish as it's 100% sedition. And then look at these politicians walking down with people clapping. So if you hire somebody to work at your place, do you all line up and smile and applaud when they rip off your company? I got to get me some of these pills so I can forget about life and just be a zombie too. Nationalized energy could save United Kingdom's households up to $4,400 that they wouldn't have if it wasn't for the inflation caused by embargoes. Kishida's popularity hit by decision to hold a state funeral for Shinzo Abe. We got a poll tonight. Should Japan's assassinated former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe get a state funeral? 88% of us said hell no. And his popularity is declining to less than 40% because he's going to have a state funeral for a guy who committed genocide and omnicide in his own country and worldwide. The country doesn't appreciate it, and you shouldn't either. So what did we do tonight? Did we get 50 views tonight? Today? I done the show early today because I'm burnt out. I haven't stopped So we had the tail end of the hurricane came down here. We didn't get it on my side. We got 70 kilometers winds. It would gust straight for like 30 seconds, 40 seconds or longer. It's a significant wind, but not like the west side of the province where they got devastated. Houses washed out to sea. One lady is allegedly, there was two of them got washed out to sea. One made it back, the other one didn't. There's a lot of damage. That hurricane made a turn, it's supposed to go along the eastern seaboard. It didn't. It cut behind the province of the St. Lawrence across towards Labrador. The hurricanes never take that track here. And the Atlantic gets the tail end of almost every Atlantic, Newfoundland gets the tail end of almost every Atlantic hurricane. We don't get it cutting through us. We get the tail end, right? This one actually went a route we'd never seen before. It was supposed to come right past my door. It didn't. It came 800 kilometers away on the other side. But because it's so wide, it's 800 miles wide, we got 70 kilometers an hour wind for 24 hours and pretty strong gusts today too. I'm doing the show early today because I'm burnt out. I haven't stopped since Thursday. And I wanted to get a nap later this evening because I'm really, really burnt out. I'm just completely burnt out. And we're hoping for parts to show up for the boat tomorrow. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. We still can salvage research on the ocean. And I don't know, right? It's strange. It's been a strange year, you know. We started off summer with a kidney stone, and that kind of just threw a big turd in the punch bowl for everything else. And pretty burnt out. We've been at this for a long time, many, many, many years. And this is very rare for me to do my show at this time of day. I'm very consistent, never early, never late. It's the same time, 5 days a week. It's a very demanding pace, by the way, to do the things I'm doing. It's an incredible amount of demand. And I'm not always going to say, because my sense of humor is going to be completely different than most people when it comes to this subject. It's because I'm at it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I have, my contempt for the industry knows no bounds. And I apologize if I offend anybody. But I will say stuff that is offensive. I am the nuclear proctologist. Just that on its own is offensive to a lot of people. It's, you know, I'm dedicated to the job. It's not a game. I'm desperate to do something good for the planet. I'm desperate for the planet to show a sign of good fate and move in the right direction. I'm under an absurd amount of pressure all the time just to produce these presentations 5 days a week. And I've been denied the ability to have a conversation repeatedly by the industry and the lobbying groups with huge influences at YouTube and Google and other social networking sites. I've been ostracized from the conversation for a very long time. Despite the fact that I'm 100% genuinely honest, and it's pretty rare for me to make a mistake. It's exceptional for me to talk about a subject that I'm not 100% familiar with and able to provide the documentation. And in order to do that, it's an absurd amount of work. And so I do that diligently all the time without fail. I'm very conscious of not making a mistake so that you don't end up repeating a mistake, right? That's so important to me. It's hard to appreciate it. And last week was a tough week on me. And Friday was, or last show was all I can do to get the show done. We did. And feeling better, but still burnt out today, so I figured I'll do the show early, knowing that people won't find me because Google doesn't share me. And you can see by only 32 votes and only 28 likes, it's an absurd small number. For something I do 5 days a week, year after year after year, and never early, never late, very consistent. And I'm censored like nothing I've been able to compare it to. So good night, everybody. Port Angeles, Dana Nasana. Thank you again, Dana. Richard McCann. ANKH, Maritime Tinker. James Lucid. Darcy Maryland. I can't even see anything there today. Darcy Martins, John Curtis, Dr. Zeus. Richard lost his kitties. Wow. That sucks. Mike Bunch. I'm just looking for shout-outs right quick as we go through it. Why not? It's a good way to end the show. The show is over. Heavy Thinker. All that subliminal technology embedded in the video for how long? From the get-go, I think. Or within a few days of the... Within a few videos on this, the first few videos on the site, they started doing that to me. Edward Leslie, Kim Jong-un, another Gmail, Sylvanus Fourth, Cough Mixture, Warren, and Chelsea's upset with me. I'll have to read it all later, Chelsea. I'm sorry if I offended you. Not much I can do about it. It's already done. I'm going to offend everybody at some point. There's nothing I can do about it. It offends me that other people don't do what I'm doing, by the way. I'm not doing this because I'm bored. I'm doing this because other people won't step up and do it. And it's important that it's done right. And so it's a lot. It's an absurd amount of dedication, 24 hours a day for me to pull this off. Good night, everybody. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night at the regular time. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. I'm censored. Absurd amount of censor on me. But the war has to go on. This is a war. We are at war. They are at war with you. You better get to war with them. That's not a game. If you want to have a future, your loved ones or your children or your grandchildren, it's time to gut up. This is your watch, not somebody else's. I take it seriously 100% of the times because it is serious and because the average person doesn't know how to articulate it or don't have the equipment, or got a million excuses. I can't come up with a single excuse, unfortunately, so I'm doing it. And I take a lot of heat for it, but I'm an honest person, and I'm entitled to make mistakes once in a while. But see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great day. It's a great day to be alive. Enjoy life. Tell your loved ones you love them. You never know when that chance will disappear. Hugs for you and your friends and your families, your loved ones, your pets, your communities, the insects, the birds, the animals, the mammals, the bacteria, the fungus. God bless all of you. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks.